The first thing you need to know about being married to someone who thinks you're invisible is that you become really good at hearing things you're not supposed to hear. Like right now, standing in my own kitchen doorway at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, listening to my wife Marta tell her best friend Jamie exactly what she thinks of our 15-year marriage. "You're so lucky to have Nick," Jamie was saying, stirring sugar into her coffee with the kind of dramatic flair that made me want to hide the good spoons. "He's so stable, so reliable. My husband would never let me have friends over this early." Marta laughed, not the warm laugh I fell in love with back in college, but this new brittle sound she'd developed over the past 2 years. "Lucky? Jamie, honey, take him if you want him. He's nothing but trouble these days." I froze in the doorway, still holding my laptop bag, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt because I'd been working late again trying to fix the Henderson account that was hemorrhaging money faster than a punctured artery. "What do you mean, trouble?" Jamie leaned forward like a vulture sensing roadkill. He questions everything I do now. Where I'm going, who I'm with, why I need new clothes for work events. It's exhausting. Sometimes I think about what life would be like if I'd married someone more ambitious, someone who understood that success requires sacrifices. Jamie nodded knowingly. "Like Sean from your office? Now there's a man who knows how to treat a woman right." My stomach dropped into my shoes. Sean Grady, the creative director at Marta's advertising agency. The guy with the Porsche and the gym membership and the habit of texting my wife at 10 o'clock at night about urgent campaign ideas. "Sean gets it," Marta said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "He understands that some of us want more than suburban mediocrity." I backed away from the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor I'd refinished myself last summer while Marta attended 3 different work retreats that somehow never resulted in any actual work being discussed at home. In my home office, the converted bedroom that Marta called Nick's Cave, I sat down at my desk and stared at my reflection in the black computer screen. 42 years old, thinning brown hair, glasses that had been stylish exactly never, and a face that my daughter Emma once described as aggressively normal. Nick Carter, IT specialist extraordinaire, husband to a woman who apparently found him about as exciting as a tax audit. The thing is, I used to think Marta and I were happy. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared dreams of Emma finishing college and maybe taking that trip to Ireland we'd been talking about for a decade, but somewhere along the line, I'd become the human equivalent of background music. Present, but not really noticed unless something went wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, saw Mom's Instagram last night. Since when does she post pictures of herself at fancy restaurants with random work people? And why does that Sean guy comment heart emojis on everything?" Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I texted back, "Your mom's just excited about work. How are classes?" "Dad, I'm not 12. Something's going on. Call me later?" Before I could respond, I heard Jamie's voice getting louder in the kitchen. "Well, I should get going. Tom's probably wondering where I am." "Tell Tom I said hello," Marta replied. "And remember what we talked about. Some secrets are worth keeping." Secrets. My wife was discussing secrets with Jamie, who had the discretion of a town crier with a megaphone. I waited until I heard the front door close, then walked back to the kitchen. Marta was loading the dishwasher, humming some song I didn't recognize. She looked up when I entered, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being caught in her natural habitat. "Morning," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I made extra coffee." "Thanks, Jamie was here early." She had some things to discuss. Marta's voice had that careful neutrality she used when she was hiding something. Work stuff, mostly. "Work stuff that involves secrets." She froze, a coffee mug halfway to the dishwasher. "What?" "I heard you tell her that some secrets are worth keeping. Just wondering what kind of work secrets require that level of discretion." For a moment, the mask slipped completely. I saw anger flash in her green eyes, not embarrassment or shame, but pure irritation that I'd had the audacity to pay attention to a conversation in my own kitchen. "You were eavesdropping." "I was getting coffee in my own house." "It's nothing that concerns you, Nick. Just office politics." "Office politics." "Right. Because office politics typically involved heart emoji comments and 10 p.m. text messages about urgent campaign ideas." "Okay," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot she'd made. It was weaker than I liked it, but I'd learned not to complain about small things. "I'll be working late again tonight. The Henderson account needs—" "Fine." She was already moving toward the stairs. "I might be late too. We have a client dinner." "Which client?" She paused at the bottom of the staircase. Does it matter? The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for months. Does it matter? Did anything about our marriage matter to her anymore? I guess not, I said. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She nodded and headed upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the shower running and then the familiar sounds of her getting ready routine. The hair dryer, the closet doors opening and closing, the click of heels on hardwood. When she came back down, she was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before and perfume that smelled expensive. She kissed my cheek, a brief, obligatory peck that felt more like a business transaction than affection. Have a good day, she said, already reaching for her car keys. You too. Say hi to Sean for me. She went very still. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just being friendly. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, and I realized this was one of those moments that would matter later. One of those moments where marriages either find their way back to solid ground or slide a little further toward the edge of the cliff. Nick, she said carefully, if you have something to say, just say it. I could have said a lot of things. I could have asked about the hotel receipt I'd found in her purse last week, the one from the Marriott downtown, signed with 2 sets of initials in lipstick. I could have mentioned the new underwear I'd seen in her laundry, the kind she definitely hadn't worn for me in the past 6 months. I could have asked why she'd changed her phone password or why she'd suddenly developed such a passionate interest in staying late at the office. Instead, I said, Have a good day, Marta. She nodded and left, her heels clicking on the front walkway like a countdown timer. I finished my coffee in the empty kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. 15 years of marriage, and I'd become a ghost in my own life. The friendly ghost, maybe. Helpful when needed, invisible when not. My phone rang. Raj, my neighbor, and the closest thing I had to a best friend since all our couple friends had somehow become Marta's friends exclusively over the past 2 years. You sound like someone stole your lunch money, he said without preamble. Good morning to you too, Raj. It's Tuesday, which means Marta had her coffee clatch with Jamie the Gossip Queen. What fresh hell did you overhear today? Raj knew me too well. He was a software engineer like me, but he'd kept himself in better shape and had never married, which made him simultaneously my most reliable friend and my most frequent source of "you should have seen this coming" observations. She told Jamie I was nothing but trouble and that she'd give me away if Jamie wanted me. Silence on the other end of the line. Raj? I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out if I should come over with beer or a baseball bat. Beer's probably more legal. Nick, man, you can't keep pretending this isn't happening. What exactly is happening, Raj? My wife thinks I'm boring? That's not exactly breaking news. Your wife is having an affair with Sean from her office, and half the neighborhood knows it except you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Hearing it said out loud, stated as a fact rather than a suspicion, made something crack open in my chest. How do you know that? Because I pay attention. Because I see her car at the Marriott on Thursday afternoons when she's supposed to be at work. Because Sean's been to your house twice in the past month when you were traveling for business, and both times he didn't leave until after midnight. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. You've been watching my house? I've been watching out for my friend. There's a difference. The crack in my chest was spreading, letting in a cold, bright anger that I hadn't felt in years. Not since college, when I'd caught my roommate stealing money from my wallet and had responded by putting shrimp shells in his heating vents right before spring break. What am I supposed to do, Raj? Confront her? Demand answers? She'll just deny everything and make me feel crazy for asking. Or, Raj said carefully, you could stop being the friendly ghost and start being the problem she says you are. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about what Raj had said, about being the problem instead of the solution, about the difference between being invisible and being underestimated. By the time I left for work, I'd made a decision. If Marta wanted to see what trouble looked like, I was more than happy to show her. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with, and I knew just where to start. The beautiful thing about being married to someone who thinks you're technologically incompetent is that they never bother to hide their digital footprints. Marta had been using the same laptop password for 3 years, Emma 2004, our daughter's name and birth year, and she'd never bothered to log out of her social media accounts. I didn't go snooping immediately. That would have been the old Nick, the one who respected boundaries and trusted his wife to tell him the truth. But the old Nick was apparently nothing but trouble, so I figured it was time to try being something else. Instead, I drove to Marta's office building downtown, a gleaming glass tower that housed 3 different advertising agencies, and a law firm that specialized in what their website called discreet personal matters. I'd been there exactly twice in the 5 years Marta had worked at Brennan and Associates, once for their Christmas party and once to pick her up when her car wouldn't start. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to make visitors feel either very important or very small. I went with important, straightening my tie and walking to the reception desk like I belonged there. "I'm here to see Marta Carter," I told the receptionist, a young woman with purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. "Is she expecting you?" "It's a surprise. I'm her husband." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly, not quite suspicious, but definitely more alert. "Let me call up to her office." "Actually, could you tell me if Sean Grady is in today? I wanted to thank him for all the extra time he's been spending with Marta on their projects." Now the receptionist looked distinctly uncomfortable. Let me just call Marta's office." She picked up the phone, and I heard her murmur something about a visitor. After a moment, she hung up and gave me a bright, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, but Marta's in a meeting right now. She said she'll call you later." "What about Sean? Is he available?" "Mr. Grady is also in a meeting." "The same meeting?" The receptionist's smile faltered. "I really couldn't say." I nodded and turned to leave, but not before I noticed the sign-in log on the reception desk, the kind where visitors had to write their name, time of arrival, and who they were visiting, the kind that would show a pattern if someone was visiting regularly. "Actually," I said, turning back, "I think I left my pen up in Marta's office last week. Could I just run up and grab it?" "I'm afraid I can't let you go up without an escort, and everyone's tied up right now." "No problem. I'll just wait." I settled into one of the leather chairs in the lobby and pulled out my phone, pretending to check emails while actually watching the elevator bank. At 11:47, the elevator doors opened and Sean Grady stepped out, adjusting his tie and looking like a man who'd just finished something that required smoothing down his hair. Sean was everything I wasn't: tall, athletic, with the kind of confident swagger that made other men either want to be him or punch him. He walked past me without a glance, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. 3 minutes later, the elevator opened again and Marta emerged, also adjusting her clothing and checking her reflection in the polished elevator doors. She looked flushed and satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn. She spotted me immediately, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, guilt, and finally irritation in the space of about 2 seconds. "Nick, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd take you to lunch. You know, be spontaneous for once." "I can't. I'm swamped today." "With Sean?" Her jaw tightened. "With work, Nick. You know, that thing I do to help pay for our life." "Right. The life where you work late every night and go to client dinners I never hear about." "Are you seriously going to do this here?" I looked around the lobby, noting that the receptionist and a few other people were pretending not to listen to our conversation. "Do what? Ask my wife to lunch? Make a scene." "I'm not making a scene, Marta. I'm just trying to understand why my wife of 15 years suddenly acts like spending time with me is a punishment." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt this time, but something that might have been regret. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "We'll talk about this at home," she said quietly. "Will we? Because lately our conversations consist of you telling me what you're doing, not discussing what we're doing." She glanced around the lobby again, clearly uncomfortable with the audience. "Nick, please, not here." I nodded and stood up. "You're right. This isn't the place for this conversation." I walked toward the exit, but stopped at the reception desk. "Excuse me," I said to the purple-haired receptionist. "Could you tell me what time the building closes? I might need to pick up my wife later." 6 o'clock on weekdays." "Thanks. And just out of curiosity, do you keep those visitor logs for very long?" The receptionist glanced at Marta, who was standing frozen by the elevators. I'm not really supposed to discuss security procedures." "Of course not. Just wondering. Have a great day." I left the building feeling like I'd accomplished something, though I wasn't entirely sure what. I'd confirmed that Sean and Marta were definitely up to something, but I'd also tipped my hand that I was paying attention. The old Nick would have worried about that, would have backed down and pretended everything was fine. But the old Nick was apparently nothing but trouble. My phone rang as I was walking to my car. Marta. "What the hell was that about?" she said without preamble. "Lunch invitation. Pretty standard husband behavior." "You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues." "By asking you to lunch?" By implying that I was lying about being busy. Were you lying? Silence. Marta, I don't like what you're becoming, Nick. What am I becoming? Paranoid, controlling. It's not attractive. I almost laughed. After 15 years of marriage, she was worried about whether I was attractive. When did you start caring about whether I was attractive? That's not what I meant. What did you mean? Another long pause. I meant that I don't like feeling like I'm under surveillance in my own marriage. And I don't like feeling like I'm married to a stranger. Maybe, she said quietly, we both need to think about what we want from this marriage. The line went dead. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at my phone and trying to process what had just happened. Had my wife of 15 years just suggested we might need to evaluate our marriage? Had she just threatened me with divorce because I'd asked her to lunch? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Carter, this is Tessa, Sean's assistant. Could we meet for coffee? I think we should talk. I stared at the message for a long moment. Sean's assistant wanted to meet with me. That could mean any number of things, none of them good for Sean and Marta. I texted back, when and where. The response came immediately. Starbucks on 5th Street. 1 hour, come alone. An hour later, I was sitting in a corner booth at Starbucks, nursing a coffee and wondering if I was about to make the situation better or catastrophically worse. Tessa turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her late 20s with short blonde hair and the kind of professional wardrobe that suggested she was much more than just an assistant. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I should. Why did you want to meet? She studied me for a moment, as if trying to decide how much to trust me. Because I like my job, and Sean's about to destroy it. What does that have to do with me? Everything, if you're planning to make this mess public. I leaned back in my chair. What mess would that be? Mr. Carter, I manage Sean's calendar. I book his hotel rooms. I know exactly what he's been doing and with whom. And you're telling me this because? Because Sean's married, your wife's married, and if this blows up the way these things usually do, it's going to take down half the agency, including me. Tessa pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a text conversation. Sean's name was at the top, and the messages were explicit enough to make me set down my coffee cup. This is from last Thursday, she said, the day your wife called in sick. I stared at the messages, feeling that cold anger spread through my chest again. The messages weren't just evidence of an affair, they were evidence of Sean and Marta laughing about me, calling me clueless and making jokes about how easy it was to fool boring suburban husbands. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? Tessa leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I want Sean gone from the agency. He's a liability, and he's been taking credit for work that other people do, including me. And you think exposing his affair will get him fired? I think exposing his affair, combined with the evidence I have of him stealing client ideas and padding his expense reports, will get him fired and make sure he never works in this industry again. I studied her face, trying to read her motivations. What do you want from me? I want you to be smart about this. Don't go in guns blazing, making accusations you can't prove. Let me help you build a case that will destroy both of them professionally and personally. Both of them? Your wife's not innocent in this, Mr. Carter. She's been helping Sean steal ideas from other agencies and presenting them as original work. She's also been using company resources for personal trips and charging personal expenses to client accounts. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. It was one thing to suspect your wife was having an affair. It was another thing entirely to learn she was also a thief. Why should I trust you? Because right now, I'm the only person who can give you what you really want. Which is? Tessa smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. Complete and total revenge. I left the coffee shop with Tessa's phone number in my contacts and a USB drive in my pocket containing what she called insurance files. I also had a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my own life. The old Nick would have tried to save his marriage, would have confronted Marta and begged her to go to counseling, would have blamed himself for not being exciting enough or successful enough or whatever enough. The new Nick had different priorities. When I got home that evening, Marta was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a stack of papers spread in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the wariness in her eyes. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Educational," I said, pouring myself a beer from the fridge. "Yours?" "Fine. Busy." I'm sure it was. We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I realized this was another one of those moments. Another chance for one of us to be honest, To try to save what was left of our marriage? Instead, I said, I'm going to be working late in my office tonight. Don't wait up. Nick, she said as I started to leave the kitchen. About earlier, at my office. What about it? I don't want us to be those people, the ones who fight in public and make everyone uncomfortable. What kind of people do you want us to be, Marta? She was quiet for a long moment. I want us to be happy. So do I said. But I'm starting to think we have very different definitions of happiness. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and went to my office, where I spent the next 3 hours going through the files Tessa had given me. By the time I was finished, I knew exactly how I was going to destroy Sean Grady and my cheating wife, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The thing about planning revenge is that it requires patience, attention to detail, and the ability to act normal while your world is falling apart. Fortunately, I'd been practicing that last skill for months without realizing it. Over the next week, I fell into a routine that would have looked perfectly ordinary to anyone watching. I went to work, came home, had dinner with Marta, and spent my evenings in my office working on client projects. Marta seemed relieved that I'd stopped asking questions about her schedule, and she'd gone back to her usual pattern of late nights and weekend work events. What she didn't know was that I'd become very good at surveillance. I'd started with the basics. Marta had never bothered to take me off her phone plan's family tracking, so I always knew where she was. When she said she was working late at the office, but her phone showed her at the Marriott downtown, I made a note. When she claimed to be at a client dinner in the suburbs, but was actually at Sean's apartment complex, I made another note. I also started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored, like the fact that Marta had been buying new lingerie but never wore it around me, or that she'd suddenly developed an interest in expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, or that she'd started going to a gym that was 20 minutes farther from our house than the perfectly good gym 3 blocks away. The same gym where Sean had a membership. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to follow them. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Marta had texted me that she was going to be late because of a client emergency. Her phone showed her leaving the office at 3:30 and heading toward downtown. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment and left work early. I found Marta's car in the parking lot of the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where I'd found that receipt signed with 2 sets of initials. I parked across the street and waited. At 4:15, Sean's Porsche pulled into the lot. He got out carrying a bottle of wine and a small gift bag, looking like a man who was very pleased with himself. He disappeared into the hotel lobby. I sat in my car for 2 hours, alternating between rage and a strange, detached fascination with my own situation. This was my life now, sitting in parking lots, spying on my wife, gathering evidence of her betrayal like some kind of suburban private investigator. At 6:30, they emerged together. Marta looked disheveled in a way that made my stomach clench, and Sean had his hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was both possessive and casual. They stood by their cars talking for a few minutes, and I could see them laughing about something. Then Sean kissed her. Not a friendly peck or a quick goodbye, but a long, passionate kiss that made it clear this wasn't just an affair, it was a relationship. I drove home in a daze and was sitting at the kitchen table when Marta walked in 45 minutes later, looking perfectly composed and carrying takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, setting the food on the counter. "The client meeting ran long, and then I had to stop for dinner." "No problem," I said. "How was your day?" "Exhausting. This new campaign is killing me." She moved around the kitchen, getting plates and utensils, chattering about deadlines and difficult clients. She seemed relaxed, almost happy, and I realized that lying to me had become so routine for her that she didn't even have to think about it anymore. "Nick," she said, and I realized she'd asked me a question. "Sorry, what?" "I said I might have to work this weekend. There's a big presentation on Monday." "Of course there is." Something in my tone made her look at me more closely. "Are you okay? You seem distant lately." I almost laughed. I seemed distant. "Just tired, I guess." "Maybe you should take a vacation day. You've been working too much." The concern in her voice sounded genuine, which somehow made everything worse. How could she sit there, pretending to care about my well-being, when she'd just spent 2 hours in a hotel room with another man? "Maybe I will," I said. That night, after Marta went to bed, I called Emma. "Dad, it's kind of late. Is everything okay?" "I'm sorry, honey. I know it's late. I wanted to hear your voice." "Dad, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" I looked at the ceiling of my office, trying to figure out how to tell my 19-year-old daughter that her mother was having an affair without destroying her relationship with Marta forever. "Your mom and I are going through a rough patch," I said finally. "I know." "You know?" "Dad, I'm not blind. Mom's been different for the past year. More secretive, more focused on work, less interested in family stuff, and her social media has gotten weird. Weird how? She's posting pictures of herself at places you're not, with people I don't recognize, and she's been liking and commenting on this Sean guy's posts constantly. It's like she's trying to send him messages through Instagram. Smart kid. Too smart. What do you think I should do? I asked. Honestly, I think you should stop pretending everything's fine and have a real conversation with her. Either fix it or end it, but stop living in this weird limbo where everyone's miserable but no one's talking about it. It's complicated, Em. No, Dad, it's not. Either she wants to be married to you or she doesn't, and if she doesn't, then you deserve to be with someone who does. After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about what Emma had said. Either fix it or end it. But there was a third option she hadn't considered. Make sure that if it ended on my terms. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Sean's apartment complex. It was one of those upscale developments with names like The Residences at Somewhere Prestigious and amenities that cost extra but made residents feel sophisticated. Sean's building was called the Metropolitan, and it had a doorman and everything. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:30, Sean emerged from the building wearing running clothes and expensive sneakers. He stretched for a few minutes, then took off jogging toward the park. I followed him at a distance, staying in my car. Sean was clearly one of those people who took fitness seriously. He ran for 45 minutes, stopping at various exercise stations to do pull-ups and push-ups. He was in good shape, I had to admit. Better shape than me. But being in good shape wasn't going to save him from what I had planned. When Sean finished his run and headed back to his building, I drove to a coffee shop and called Tessa. "I'm ready," I said when she answered. "Ready for what?" "To destroy them both." "Good. I was wondering when you'd get tired of playing the victim." "What do you need from me?" "Access to your wife's computer and phone. Can you get me that?" "I can get the computer. The phone might be harder." "The computer will be enough to start. I need to see her email accounts and her file directories. If she's been stealing client ideas and charging personal expenses to company accounts, there will be evidence." "And then what?" "Then we give that evidence to the right people and watch everything burn down." That afternoon, while Marta was at her client meeting, which her phone's location services told me was actually at Sean's apartment, I copied the contents of her laptop onto an external drive. It took 3 hours to transfer everything, and I spent the time going through her browser history and saved files. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Marta hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been planning to leave me for months. I found emails to divorce attorneys, real estate agents, and financial advisors. I found searches for apartments in Sean's neighborhood and research on how to hide assets during a divorce. But the most damaging discovery was a folder labeled New Business Development that contained stolen campaign ideas from 3 different agencies, modified just enough to avoid obvious plagiarism but clearly not original work. Marta and Sean had been systematically stealing ideas and presenting them as their own, billing clients hundreds of thousands of dollars for work they hadn't actually done. I called Tessa immediately. "How fast can you put together a presentation?" I asked. "What kind of presentation?" "The kind that ends careers." "Give me 3 days." "You've got 2. That weekend, Marta told me she had to work both Saturday and Sunday. "Big presentation on Monday," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Sean and I need to get everything perfect." "I'm sure you do." Sunday evening, she came home looking exhausted and stressed. She barely touched her dinner and went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I stayed up late in my office, putting the finishing touches on my own presentation. Not for a client, but for the partners at Brennan & Associates, the state licensing board, and several of the agencies whose ideas had been stolen. Monday morning, Marta left for work early, kissing my cheek and telling me she'd probably be late because of post-presentation meetings. "Good luck," I said. "Thanks. I think this presentation could change everything for us." She had no idea how right she was. At 10 a.m., I sent an email to the managing partner at Brennan & Associates with copies to the other partners, the HR director, and the general counsel. The subject line was simple. Urgent. Evidence of employee misconduct. The email contained everything: the stolen campaign materials, the falsified expense reports, the evidence of personal use of company resources, and a detailed timeline of Sean and Marta's affair, including hotel receipts and restaurant charges to company accounts. At 10:30, I sent similar emails to the 3 agencies whose work had been stolen, along with copies to the State Advertising Licensing Board. At 11 a.m., I called the IRS fraud hotline and reported both Sean and Marta for tax evasion related to their unreported income from stolen intellectual property. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. My phone started ringing at 11:45. Marta, calling from work. "Nick, what the hell have you done?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb with me. The partners just called Sean and me into an emergency meeting. They have evidence of things. How did they get this information?" "Maybe they're just good at their jobs." "This is you, isn't it? You're trying to destroy my career because you're paranoid about Sean and me working together. Are you having an affair with Sean, Marta?" Silence. "Marta, are you having an affair?" It's not what you think." "What I think is that my wife has been lying to me for months, stealing from her employer, and planning to divorce me while hiding assets. What I think is that you and Sean deserve each other." "Nick, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. I know about the hotel rooms, the stolen campaigns, the fake expense reports, all of it. The only question now is whether you want to try to salvage something from this mess or if you want to keep lying until the police get involved." "Police?" "Tax evasion is a federal crime, Marta. So is wire fraud. You and Sean have been billing clients for work you stole from other agencies. That's fraud." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house. Today." "Nick, today, Marta, because tomorrow this gets much worse for both of you." I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I poured myself a beer, even though it was barely noon, and waited for my wife to come home and pack her bags. The war had officially begun. Marta came home at 2:30 in the afternoon, and I could hear her crying before she even got through the front door. She found me in the kitchen, sitting at the table with my laptop open and a stack of printed documents beside me. "Nick, please," she said, her mascara streaked and her perfect composure completely shattered. "We need to talk about this." "No," I said without looking up from my screen. "We need to talk about you packing your things and leaving." "This is my house, too." "Actually, it's not." I slid one of the documents across the table to her. "It's my house. I bought it before we got married, and I never added your name to the deed. Legally, you're a guest who's overstayed her welcome." She picked up the document with shaking hands. It was a copy of the original deed, along with a letter from my attorney explaining the legal implications. "You can't just kick me out. We're married." "We're married, but we won't be for much longer, and until the divorce is final, you can stay at Sean's place. I'm sure he'll be happy to have you." "Sean and I, it's over. The agency fired him today. His wife found out about us, and she's filing for divorce. He blames me for everything falling apart." I looked up from my laptop for the first time since she'd walked in. "So, when things got difficult, he threw you under the bus? What a prince. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Marta? You were going to keep lying to me while you and Sean stole from your clients and planned your new life together. You were going to hide assets and leave me with nothing while you rode off into the sunset with your true love? You don't understand. Sean and I, we connected on a level that you and I never did. He understood my ambitions, my dreams. He made me feel alive again." "He made you feel alive by helping you commit fraud?" "The campaign ideas weren't stolen. They were adapted. That's how the industry works." "Bullshit." I turned my laptop around so she could see the screen. It was displaying a side-by-side comparison of one of their campaigns and the original work from another agency. "This isn't adaptation, Marta. This is plagiarism. And billing clients $300,000 for work you stole is fraud." She stared at the screen, and I watched the last of her defiance crumble. "What's going to happen to me?" "That depends on how cooperative you are with the investigation. The state licensing board is reviewing your case, the IRS is looking into your tax returns, and 3 different agencies are considering civil lawsuits. If you're lucky, you'll just lose your license and have to pay restitution. If you're not lucky, you'll go to prison. And you're okay with that? You're okay with destroying the mother of your child?" "I'm okay with there being consequences for your actions. I'm okay with you finally having to face the reality of what you've done instead of blaming everyone else for your problems." Marta sank into the chair across from me, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "About the affair? A couple of months. About the fraud? About a week." "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because I kept hoping you'd come to your senses. I kept thinking that the woman I married was still in there somewhere, and that she'd realize what she was throwing away. I never meant to hurt you. You just meant to lie to me, steal from your employer, plan a divorce behind my back, and run away with another man. But you never meant to hurt me." She started crying again, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger who happened to share 15 years of history with me. "What about Emma?" she asked. "What about her? What are you going to tell her? The truth? That her mother made some very bad choices, and now she has to deal with the consequences. She'll hate me. Maybe. Or maybe she'll understand that actions have consequences and that you can't lie and cheat your way through life without eventually getting caught." My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, Mom called me crying about some kind of work problem. She says you're being unreasonable. What's going on?" I showed the text to Marta. "Want to tell her yourself, or should I?" "I'll tell her." "Good. And Marta? Tell her the truth this time. All of it." Marta nodded and pulled out her phone. I listened to her call our daughter and try to explain why her life was falling apart. It was painful to watch, but I didn't leave the room. After 15 years of marriage, I figured I'd earned the right to witness her final performance. When she finished the call, she looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You're not the man I married," she said. "No, I'm not. The man you married would have blamed himself for not being enough. He would have begged you to stay and promised to change. He would have let you walk all over him while you figured out what you wanted. And this man? This man knows his worth, and he knows that you threw away something good for something that was never going to last." She nodded and stood up. "I'll pack my things. You have 2 hours. After that, I'm changing the locks." She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around in our bedroom, opening drawers and closets. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing up some emails to my attorney and accountant. There were still loose ends to tie up, assets to protect, and legal strategies to discuss. An hour later, she came back downstairs carrying 2 suitcases and a box of personal items. She looked around the kitchen as if she was seeing it for the first time. "I know you don't believe me," she said, "but I did love you. I still do, in my way." "Your way isn't good enough anymore, Marta." She nodded and walked toward the front door. Then she stopped and turned back. "What you did today, exposing Sean and me like that, it was cruel." "No," I said. "It was justice. Cruel would have been letting you keep destroying people's lives while you played house with your boyfriend. The Nick I married would never have done something like this. The Marta I married would never have given him a reason to." She left without another word, and I watched from the kitchen window as she loaded her car and drove away. Then I poured myself another beer and called Raj. "It's done," I said when he answered. "How do you feel?" "Empty, angry, relieved, vindicated, all at the same time." "That sounds about right. You want company?" "Not tonight. I think I need to sit with this for a while." "Fair enough. But Nick?" "Yeah? You did the right thing. It took guts to stand up for yourself like that." After we hung up, I walked through my house now, and tried to figure out what came next. The legal proceedings would take months to resolve. The divorce would be messy and expensive. Emma would need time to process everything and decide how she wanted to handle her relationship with her mother. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I'd stopped being the victim of other people's choices and started making choices of my own. My phone rang. "Emma?" "Dad? I just got off the phone with Mom. She told me everything." "How are you handling it?" "I'm angry and disappointed, and honestly not that surprised." "Not surprised?" "Dad, I've been watching this train wreck for months. Mom's been acting like a teenager with a crush, and you've been acting like everything was fine when it obviously wasn't. I kept waiting for one of you to be honest about what was happening." "I'm sorry you had to go through this, Em." "I'm not. I'm glad it's finally out in the open. I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself. And I'm glad Mom is going to have to face the consequences of what she did. Even if those consequences are pretty severe. Especially if they're severe. Dad, she didn't just cheat on you. She committed crimes. She stole from her clients and lied to everyone who trusted her. She needs to be held accountable for that." "What about your relationship with her?" "I don't know yet. Right now, I'm pretty disgusted with her. Maybe that will change over time. Maybe it won't. But I'm not going to pretend that what she did was okay just because she's my mother. I love you, kiddo. I love you too, Dad. And I'm proud of you." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The house was quiet and peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to wonder where my wife was, or what she was doing, or who she was with. The next morning, I got a call from the managing partner at Brennan & Associates. "Mr. Carter, this is David Brennan. I wanted to thank you for bringing this situation to our attention." "You're welcome. I assume you're conducting a full investigation?" "We are, and I want you to know that we take this very seriously. Sean and Marta violated every ethical standard we have, and they put our agency at significant legal risk. What happens now? Now we cooperate fully with the authorities, make restitution to the affected clients, and try to rebuild our reputation. We've also decided to offer a reward to anyone who provides information that helps us recover stolen assets or identify additional victims. A reward? $50,000. I understand you provided most of the evidence that broke this case open. That reward is yours if you want it. I thought about it for a moment. $50,000 would go a long way toward paying my legal fees and helping Emma with college expenses. I'll take it, I said. Excellent. My assistant will be in touch with the details. Then, after we hung up, I realized that not only had I gotten revenge on Marta and Sean, but I was actually going to profit from their downfall. The old Nick would have felt guilty about that. The new Nick just smiled and started planning how to spend the money. Over the next few weeks, the story got better and better. Sean's wife took him for everything in their divorce, including his beloved Porsche. Marta couldn't find another job in advertising because word had spread throughout the industry about the fraud investigation. 3 different agencies filed civil lawsuits seeking damages, and the state licensing board revoked both Sean's and Marta's professional licenses. The IRS investigation was still ongoing, but my attorney was confident that both Sean and Marta would face significant financial penalties, if not criminal charges. Jamie, Marta's gossipy best friend, tried to reach out to me a few times, presumably to get details she could share with the neighborhood rumor mill. I ignored her calls and blocked her number. Emma came home for a weekend visit and told me that Marta was living in a studio apartment across town and working as a waitress while she waited for the legal proceedings to conclude. "Have you talked to her?" I asked. "Once. She wanted me to ask you to drop the charges." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you didn't file the charges, the government did, and that if she wanted forgiveness, she should start by taking responsibility for what she did instead of trying to blame everyone else." "How did she take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. She hung up on me." "I'm sorry, Em." "Don't be. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with them. Just like you made your choice to stand up for yourself, and now you get to live with that." "Any regrets?" Emma looked around the house, which I'd been slowly redecorating to suit my own tastes rather than Marta's. "None at all. You seem happier than you've been in years." She was right. Despite the legal drama and the stress of the divorce proceedings, I felt lighter and more optimistic than I had in a long time. I'd stopped being the invisible man in my own life and started being the protagonist of my own story. And the best part? The story wasn't over yet. 6 months after Marta moved out, I was sitting in my lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers when she walked in with her attorney. I hadn't seen her since the day she packed her bags, and the change was startling. She'd lost weight, her hair was shorter and less styled, and she was wearing clothes that looked like they came from a discount store rather than the boutiques she used to frequent. "Nick," she said, nodding at me with something that might have been respect. Marta, her lawyer, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, spread papers across the conference table. "I think we can wrap this up quickly. My client is prepared to sign the settlement agreement as negotiated." The settlement was everything I'd hoped for and more. Marta got nothing, no alimony, no share of the house, no claim to my retirement accounts. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue additional civil remedies related to her fraud, and I wouldn't contest her eventual bankruptcy filing. "Before we sign," Marta said, "I want to say something." Her lawyer looked alarmed. "Mrs. Carter, I don't think that's advisable." "I don't care what you think is advisable." She looked directly at me. "Nick, I know you have every reason to hate me. I know I destroyed our marriage and hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far." "What did you intend, Marta?" "I intended to have an affair, leave you for Sean, and start over. I thought I could do it cleanly without destroying anyone's life." "Except mine." "I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd move on and find someone who appreciated you more than I did." I stared at her for a long moment. "You thought I'd be fine with you stealing half our assets, lying to our daughter, and abandoning our marriage for a man who threw you away the moment things got difficult?" I wasn't thinking clearly. I was selfish and stupid, and I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy, even if it meant hurting other people. And now? Now I know that happiness built on lies and betrayal isn't real happiness. It's just selfishness with better marketing. My lawyer cleared his throat. "If we could proceed with the signing—" "One more thing," I said. "What happened to Sean?" Marta's expression darkened. "Sean is working at a car dealership in Phoenix. His ex-wife got everything in their divorce, and he's facing criminal fraud charges in 2 states. He blames me for ruining his life." "Do you blame him for ruining yours?" "No, I blame myself. Sean didn't force me to have an affair or help him steal campaign ideas. I made those choices because I thought I was smarter than everyone else and that the rules didn't apply to me. We signed the papers in silence. When it was over, Marta's lawyer packed up his files and left quickly, but Marta lingered. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "What? Are you happy, now that you've gotten your revenge? Are you actually happy?" I thought about it. Was I happy? I was certainly satisfied with how things had turned out. Marta and Sean had faced consequences for their actions. I'd protected my assets and my dignity, and I'd discovered that I was stronger and more resourceful than I'd given myself credit for. But happy? "I'm content," I said finally. "I'm at peace with my decisions, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes next." What does come next? I don't know yet. Maybe I'll travel, maybe I'll date, maybe I'll just enjoy having a quiet life without drama and lies. She nodded. "For what it's worth, I think you'll be fine. Better than fine. You're a good man, Nick. You deserved better than what I gave you." Yes, I did. She left, and I sat in the lawyer's office for a few more minutes, processing the fact that my marriage was officially over. 15 years reduced to a stack of legal documents and a property settlement agreement. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How did it go?" I texted back, "It's done. Officially divorced as of 20 minutes ago. How do you feel?" "Free." That evening, Raj came over with a bottle of expensive whiskey and a plan to celebrate my newfound bachelor status. "So, what's the first thing you're going to do as a free man?" he asked, pouring 2 generous drinks. "Sleep in on Saturday without feeling guilty about it." "That's it? That's your big plan for freedom?" "Raj, for the past 15 years, I've been living my life according to someone else's schedule, someone else's priorities, someone else's definition of success. I'm going to spend some time figuring out what I actually want. And what do you think you want?" I looked around my house, which had become truly mine over the past 6 months. I'd painted the walls colors I liked, bought furniture that was comfortable rather than stylish, and turned Marta's formal dining room into a home gym. It felt like a place where I belonged rather than a place where I was tolerated. "I want to be myself," I said. "Not the invisible husband, not the boring suburban guy, not the victim of someone else's bad choices. Just myself. And who is that? I'm still figuring it out. But I know he's someone who doesn't let other people walk all over him. Someone who stands up for himself and doesn't apologize for having standards." Raj raised his glass. "To the new Nick Carter. To the real Nick Carter." We drank, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had sustained me through the investigation and the divorce proceedings was finally fading, replaced by something calmer but no less determined. A month later, I got a call from Tessa, Sean's former assistant who had helped me gather evidence against him and Marta. "I have news," she said. "Sean just pled guilty to wire fraud. He's going to prison for 18 months. "What about Marta?" "She took a plea deal. 2 years probation, restitution to the affected clients, and community service. She'll also have to pay a $50,000 fine to the IRS. So it's really over. It's over. You won." After we hung up, I realized that Tessa was right. I had won. Not just the legal battle or the financial settlement, but something more important. I'd won back my self-respect and my sense of agency in my own life. That weekend, Emma came home for a visit and found me in the backyard, grilling burgers and reading a book about hiking the Appalachian Trail. "Planning a trip, Dad?" "Maybe. I've always wanted to do a long-distance hike, but your mother thought it was a waste of time." "What else did Mom think was a waste of time that you might want to try now?" I thought about it. Learning to play guitar, taking a photography class, maybe even dating again eventually. "I think you should do all of those things." "Even the dating part?" "Especially the dating part. You're a good catch, Dad. You're honest, loyal, funny when you want to be, and you've got your life together. Some woman is going to be very lucky to find you." "What about you? How are you dealing with everything that happened?" Emma was quiet for a moment, turning her burger on the grill. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "I'm proud that you stood up for yourself and didn't let Mom and Sean get away with what they did. I'm proud that you fought for what was right, even when it was hard." "And your mother?" "I'm working on forgiving her, but I'm not there yet. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm more interested in getting to know the real you, the you that isn't trying to keep someone else happy all the time." "I'd like that too." We ate dinner on the back deck, talking about her classes and her plans for the summer and my ideas for remodeling the kitchen. It was the kind of easy, comfortable conversation I'd missed having with Marta. the kind where both people are actually listening to each other instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in my office and opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about starting a blog or maybe even writing a book about my experience. Not a revenge fantasy or a bitter screed against unfaithful wives, but something more thoughtful about what it means to rebuild your life after betrayal. I started typing. The first thing you need to know about being married to someone who thinks you're invisible is that you become really good at hearing things you're not supposed to hear. I wrote for 2 hours, telling the story of how I'd discovered my wife's affair, gathered evidence of her crimes, and systematically dismantled the life she'd built on lies and betrayal. But as I wrote, I realized the story wasn't really about revenge. It was about refusing to be a victim. It was about standing up for yourself when no one else will. It was about the difference between being nice and being strong. And it was about the fact that sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's becoming the person you were meant to be all along. I saved the document and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I would keep writing. I would also call about that photography class and maybe look into guitar lessons. I would start planning that hiking trip and thinking about what I wanted my future to look like. But tonight, I would just sit in my quiet house and enjoy the peace that comes from knowing that you fought for what matters and won. The old Nick Carter had been nothing but trouble, invisible, accommodating, easily dismissed. The new Nick Carter was a different kind of trouble entirely, the kind that stood up, fought back, and refused to be ignored. And that, I thought, was exactly the kind of trouble the world needed more of. 3 years later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Denver, editing the final chapter of my book, Invisible No More, A Man's Guide to Reclaiming His Life After Betrayal, when I saw a familiar face walk through the door, Marta. She looked different, older, more worn, but also somehow more genuine than she had during the last years of our marriage. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, and she moved with less of the artificial confidence that had characterized her during her affair with Sean. She saw me at the same time I saw her, and for a moment we just stared at each other across the crowded coffee shop. Then she walked over to my table. "Nick, what are you doing in Denver?" "Book tour," I said, closing my laptop. "My publisher set up some readings and interviews. What about you?" "I live here now. I moved here after everything fell apart. I'm working for a nonprofit that helps small businesses with their marketing. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." "That's good. I'm glad you're doing well." She gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Can I sit for a minute?" I nodded, and she sat down, looking nervous. "I heard about your book," she said. "I haven't read it, but I know it's about what happened between us." "It's about what happened to me," I corrected. "About how I learned to stop being a victim and start being an advocate for myself." Are you angry that I'm here? Do you want me to leave?" I studied her face, looking for traces of the woman who had lied to me for months and stolen from her clients to fund her affair. I found some, but I also saw something else, genuine remorse, and maybe even a kind of peace. "I'm not angry," I said. I was, for a long time, but anger is exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. "Like what?" "Like learning to play guitar, like hiking the Appalachian Trail, like writing a book, like dating a wonderful woman who actually enjoys my company." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." "So do you, Marta. But you deserve to be happy in a way that doesn't hurt other people. I'm working on that, therapy mostly, and trying to make amends where I can." "Is that what this is? An amends?" "Partly. But mostly it's just, I saw you sitting here, looking content and successful, and I wanted to tell you that I'm glad. I'm glad you didn't let what I did destroy you. I'm glad you fought back and won. It wasn't about winning or losing, Marta. It was about refusing to accept a life that didn't honor who I am." She nodded. "I understand that now. It took me a long time, and it cost me everything, but I understand it." We talked for another few minutes, about Emma, who was thriving in graduate school, about Sean, who had gotten out of prison and disappeared, about the strange turns our lives had taken since our divorce. When she got up to leave, she paused at my table. "Nick, I know this doesn't change anything, and I know it's too late to matter, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for the affair or the fraud, but for taking you for granted, for making you feel invisible in your own life. You were never the problem. I was." "I know," I said, "but thank you for saying it." She left, and I sat in the coffee shop for a while longer, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years ago, I had been the invisible husband, the man everyone took for granted, the victim of other people's choices. Now I was the author of a best-selling book, the host of a popular podcast about rebuilding after betrayal, and the partner of a woman who saw me as the hero of my own story rather than a supporting character in hers. I opened my laptop and started working on my next chapter. It was going to be about forgiveness, not the kind that excuses bad behavior, but the kind that frees you from carrying other people's mistakes around like stones in your pockets. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. The best revenge is building a life so good that their betrayal becomes just another chapter in your success story, and that's exactly what I had done. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.